Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. It's Tom. I'm wearing a tie today because, as many of you know, the legislature is in its final run. They have to pass a balanced budget before June 30th for the 2021 fiscal year, which begins July 1st. So there's very little time left. We, of course, have been speaking with them recently. Of course, we originally had to propose 14% budget reductions, and we are hopeful that, given that the revenue picture looks better than it did, that we may only have an 11% budget reduction, which, of course, is still pretty steep. But that difference we are hoping, will allow us to uh, certainly reduce the number of furlough days this coming year that our employees may have to take, restore funding for some of our educational programs, especially with the Multi-Agency Alliance for Children, restoring funding for our CASA partners, and restoring a good bit of funding for our group homes on whom we rely, and we certainly need the capacity for serving children that they provide. There will be, of course, other legislative priorities, and we'll be down there discussing with the legislature what can and can't get through. It's one of those years when I'm afraid we're probably not going to be able to do all that we want as a state agency and as just sort of as citizens of the state of Georgia. Because of the pandemic, we're kind of caught in a short timeline, and I know the legislators will be working very hard to do all that they can in this short period of time before the end of the fiscal year. Of course, June is Reunification Month, and I can't emphasize enough how important reunification is to our work. If you think about the fact that our social workers, our child protective service workers, the vast majority of the work they do is engaging with families to help families resolve the family dysfunction that they face. A lot of times, of course, we are able to do that by helping families while the children remain in the home. And so it may be a question of some substance abuse issues. It may be a question of really significantly struggling with eviction issues, or with just some mental health issues. It may be just a matter of helping a struggling family cope. And of course, when we do have to remove a child because the issues are so severe as to present a danger of real harm to that child, the vast majority of our occasions we are working hard to reunite that family. We don't do this alone. We do it in partnership with our foster parents, who often serve as mentors to the families we work with. We do it in partnership with the courts, with our CASAs, with our guardians ad litem, with our parent and child attorneys. So it's really a group effort. But I do think when it comes to uh, moving toward reunification, our goal is always going to be that if we can reunify the family, and especially if we can do it within, say, 12 months or so, we need to make sure that we've got all hands on deck moving as rapidly as possible to make sure that that child can be safe in his or her home. And then, of course, once we have found some semblance of safety, to get that child back home, and then to continue working with the family for a period of time to make sure that whatever the dysfunction, whatever the issue that caused the child to need to go into foster care, for example, can be addressed. Of course, as you can imagine, that's harder to do when our workers find themselves in an adversarial position with the families. And so, one of the things we've proposed this year is both a cost saving issue and a policy issue, is repealing what in the legislature what we call the Child Protective Services Information System, or the Child Abuse Registry. What we have found is it's in the 4 years that this registry has been in effect, that a couple of things have happened. Number one, it our workers are not substantiating as many cases of neglect and abuse, and I think part of that is because they realize that substantiation, which is really it's an important data point for us, because it helps us to track whether or not we're being successful in preventing repeat maltreatment. But they understand that if they substantiate, they may be dragged into an adversarial proceeding in an administrative law court in which the family and the caseworkers are being really in this bumping heads kind of situation, in which oftentimes children are called to be cross-examined about what happened to them unnecessarily. And of course, these are situations in which we can do our work without a formal substantiation. And we have really looked at this from a policy angle, and we understand that this is something that really we need to leave the issue of whether something that someone is classified as an offender to our juvenile courts and to our criminal courts, and to allow our social workers to get back to the work of assisting families in making different determination, not one of blame, but one of, is this child safe? Can we make this child's home safe? If we are not able to keep this child safe in that home, what other permanent options do we have for getting that child into a safe home through a guardianship or relative placement or adoption? And we also recognize that by eliminating this child abuse registry and going back to more of an internal process that we had for many years before 2016, we'll also save about $1.5 million a year that we can use, of course, to provide services to families and children. And that's really important, especially when we're facing this budgetary situation. So in the midst of Reunification Month, I just want to thank all of those who are working with us to improve our system, to make sure that we are acting in a way towards families that is empathetic, is understanding, but really is focused on the safety of children and not necessarily on blaming the parents, which will leave to our law enforcement and court systems, as it should be. I also want to kind of note that we have some just work stuff for those of you who are working with the agency. We have the new IOTIS Learning Management System. We've got some training that's got to be done by August 15th, and all employees and contract staff who are hired between June 15th and July 30th need to complete their 2020 mandatory training by August. And all mandatory training courses must be completed by August 15th. So please pay attention to that. Another great thing that we've launched is the PEBT. As I mentioned before, this is the program that will provide about $250 or so to each family who would have whose children, would have received free or reduced lunch when schools were closed between March 16th and say May 22nd or so. We have some technology that has to be rolled out to do that well, but we have received approval from the federal government for how we're going to do it. We're marching forward on that, and we expect those benefits in the nature of $250 million, $260 million to be flowing out to those families and into our economy, either through our SNAP program or through this extended PEBT program in July. So we actually, if you go on our website, dfax.georgia.gov, we have a sort of an explainer about the PEBT program. You can scroll down a little bit and take a look at that. And I would encourage you to learn more about that program. Also want to thank our eligibility workers for the great work that they're doing in terms of SNAP and TANF timeliness. We're up at 98, 99% right now. We hope we can sustain this. We know that part of our success is due to the hard work of our folks and the technology we've been able to leverage, but also part of it, of course, is due to the fact that the federal government has given us some leeway and waivers. But we're going to continue to work with y'all to make sure we're maintaining that standard of excellence, and appreciate your hard work. And on child welfare, of course, we, as the COVID threat, we hope is declining, or at least as we're learning to better how to manage the threat of COVID. I think we'll be more and more getting back to certainly personal in-person visits between parents and children, because we know that those visits are important. But we do want to continue to exercise social distance, to wear masks, to telework whenever possible, because we want to make sure that we tamp down this virus as much as possible so that it does not interfere the valuable work we do in this agency. So thanks, everybody. Hope you all have a good week. If you got any questions, you can always email me, talkwithtom@dhs.ga.gov. We are continually trying to get out more information about the potential furloughs, about the potential options for things like partial unemployment and what we're going to do about health care and retirement and that sort of thing. And none of this, of course, none of our furlough issues will be finalized, and none of our budgetary issues will be finalized until the legislature passes that budget and Governor Kemp signs it. So we want to make sure that y'all know what we know, and want to make sure we keep you informed. So thanks. See y'all next week. Bye.